The first encounter. The stars were quiet, almost peaceful, as the human colony stretched further into the galaxy. Humans had always dreamed of exploring the cosmos, and now, with their advanced technology, they were reaching parts of space once thought unreachable. Yet they never anticipated what lay beyond the darkness of deep space. It started with a single signal. A faint pulse, far from any known star system, caught the attention of Earth's top scientists. They had thought it was just another glitch in the system, perhaps an anomaly from a distant planet or a malfunctioning probe. But this pulse was different. It was too structured, too deliberate. Something, or someone, was sending a message. The signal was decoded, and to the astonishment of everyone, it came from a place no human had ever ventured before. It was a star system on the edge of the galaxy, untouched by humanity. But there was more. The message, although brief, contained only one word: approach. Nervous excitement spread throughout the human colonies. Could this be the first sign of alien life? The possibilities were endless. Scientists, politicians, and military leaders scrambled to understand what was happening. Despite the excitement, an undercurrent of fear began to grow. What if the message wasn't an invitation, but a warning? In response, humanity sent a fleet of exploratory ships, led by the most advanced vessel ever built, the Vanguard. The crew of the Vanguard was composed of the brightest minds and most skilled soldiers, ready to face whatever they would find. As the ships traveled through space, the crew tried to stay focused, though a constant unease tugged at them. Days turned into weeks as they neared the source of the signal. The tension among the crew grew, and whispers of doubt began to spread. What would they find? Would it be a peaceful first contact, or something far more dangerous? Then, as they approached the coordinates, the Vanguard detected something massive. A fleet. But this wasn't any normal fleet. The ships were enormous, twice the size of Earth's largest warships, and they were unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Sleek, dark, and almost intimidating, these ships hovered in the depths of space like silent predators, waiting. The humans couldn't understand. There had been no signs of aggression, yet the presence of these warships made it clear. The message had not been a friendly invitation. The silence between the fleets stretched longer than anyone had expected, until finally the first transmission came through. A voice echoed across the Vanguard's communication system, cold and commanding. "We are the Zreth. You are trespassing on our territory. Leave now or face the consequences." The voice sent a chill down the spines of the crew. The Zreth, a name the humans had only heard in whispered rumors. A race of ruthless conquerors, known throughout the galaxy for their cold, calculating nature and their brutal treatment of anyone they considered weak. Panic spread throughout the human fleet. This was not a friendly greeting. It was a threat. Yet, the humans had no choice but to respond. They were too far into enemy space now to turn back. Captain Amelia Clark, the commander of the Vanguard, stood firm at the helm of her ship. Her heart raced, but her face remained calm. She had been trained for moments like this. It was her job to lead, even in the face of overwhelming danger. "We come in peace. We mean you no harm," Captain Clark transmitted, her voice steady. But she knew, deep down, that the Zreth might not believe her. The Zreth didn't care about peace. They cared about power, about domination. The Zreth fleet remained silent for a moment, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, another message came through. This time, it was shorter, colder. "Humanity is weak. You are not worthy of existence. Prepare for your extinction." Fear surged through the Vanguard's crew. The message was clear. The Zreth had no intention of negotiating. They had come to destroy humanity. Captain Clark's mind raced. She knew that if the Zreth were to attack, they would be no match for the alien fleet's firepower. The Vanguard alone didn't stand a chance, let alone the entire human fleet. The crew had to act quickly, or they would be wiped out before they could even begin to understand the aliens. The Zreth ships began to move. Their massive engines roared to life, their dark forms shifting in space, moving toward the human fleet with terrifying speed. Captain Clark's pulse quickened, but she knew it was not the time for panic. There had to be a way to survive. She turned to her crew, her voice cutting through the fear in the room. All hands, brace for impact. We're not going down without a fight. The first shots rang out from the Zreth ships. Energy blasts streaked through space, targeting the human fleet. The Vanguard dodged the first wave, but there were too many ships. Humanity was being tested in a way it had never been before. But amidst the chaos, Captain Clark had one final thought. This was only the beginning. No matter how this encounter ended, one thing was certain. Humanity was about to learn just how far they could go to survive. And the Zreth. They were about to learn that humanity wasn't as weak as they had thought. The battle begins. The Vanguard lurched as the first energy blast hit its shields. The shockwave rattled through the entire ship, sending vibrations down the halls and causing lights to flicker. A deep hum filled the air as the shield struggled to hold against the overwhelming power of the Zreth weapons. "Shields holding at 60%, shouted Lieutenant Carson from the control panel. His fingers danced across the console, adjusting the ship's defenses as best as he could. But it was clear, the Zreth had come prepared. They were not here to negotiate. They were here to destroy. Captain Clark stood at the center of the command deck, watching the unfolding chaos. Her mind raced as she tried to calculate the best course of action. The Zreth ships were too powerful. The Vanguard had advanced technology, but it was still no match for the firepower of a fleet that could destroy entire planets. "How many ships do we have left?" she asked, her voice steady but strained. She needed to know how bad things really were. 24, Captain. Out of the 40 ships we brought, half are already disabled or retreating. Lieutenant Carson's voice was tight with anxiety. The Zreth ships moved in perfect formation, each one a towering war machine. The way they moved together, methodical, cold, and ruthless, was a terrifying sight. It was clear they had been built for war, not diplomacy. They didn't need to speak to convey their intentions. Every movement spoke of death and destruction. "We can't win this, Captain. We need to retreat." Carson's words were hesitant, but carried the weight of reality. It was a hard truth. The Vanguard was one ship, and it was up against a fleet that outmatched it in size, power, and numbers. But Captain Clark's eyes remained fixed on the battle unfolding before her. The decision wasn't so simple. They couldn't just turn and run, not when humanity's future was at stake. She had always been a soldier, a leader who would stand and fight, no matter the odds. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers." Her voice was firm. She was not going to let humanity be wiped out without a fight. The Vanguard shot forward, narrowly dodging another blast from the Zreth ships. The crew braced for impact as they entered a chaotic dance of survival, weaving through the incoming fire. "Captain, they've launched fighters," shouted Commander Lee, the ship's tactical officer. "Hundreds of them. They're coming fast." The ship shook again as more blasts hit their shields, but the Vanguard held strong. The crew was doing everything they could to keep the ship intact, but the situation was growing more desperate by the minute. "We need to take down their flagship," Captain Clark said, her mind calculating their only real shot at survival. If they could destroy the Zreth command ship, it could cripple their fleet and perhaps give humanity a fighting chance. "Captain, their flagship is heavily protected. It will take more than just our weapons to break through," Lieutenant Carson warned. But there was no time for hesitation. The Zreth were relentless. With every passing second, the human fleet was being torn apart, and the Vanguard was right in the heart of the storm. "I don't care if it's protected, we'll find a way." Clark's voice was resolute. "Launch everything we've got. We need to hit them with everything we have." The crew scrambled, pushing every bit of energy and power the Vanguard could spare into their weapons. The human fleet may have been outmatched, but humanity had something the Zreth didn't: the will to fight. The Vanguard's weapons opened fire, a barrage of plasma and energy bolts lighting up the dark expanse of space. The shots hit the Zreth flagship, but the ship's shields held firm, its defensive systems absorbing the brunt of the attack. "We need to disable their shields first. Otherwise, we won't stand a chance," Commander Lee shouted over the chaos. Captain Clark nodded, making a split-second decision. Focus all fire on their shield generators. No distractions. The Vanguard adjusted its course, locking onto the energy readings from the Zreth flagship's shield generators. Every weapon the ship had fired relentlessly, hoping to find a weak point. The Zreth flagship shuddered under the barrage. For the first time, there was a noticeable crack in its shield. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Captain Clark could feel her heart race as she prepared for the final assault. "We've almost got them, Captain. One more hit and their shields will collapse," Carson shouted. Captain Clark steadied herself. This was the moment. With all of humanity's future hanging in the balance, there was no turning back. "All weapons, fire now." The Vanguard released everything it had. The energy beams shot forward, slamming into the weakened shield of the Zreth flagship. This time, the shields faltered completely, and the massive ship shook violently. It was a direct hit to the core. The Zreth flagship exploded into a brilliant ball of light, sending shockwaves through the surrounding ships. The Zreth fleet's formation faltered as their command center was destroyed. For a brief moment, it seemed as if the tide had turned. But it wasn't over yet. "Captain, the Zreth are regrouping," Commander Lee warned. "They're not done yet." Captain Clark's eyes narrowed. They had taken down the flagship, but the war was far from over. The Zreth fleet was reeling, but they would soon adapt. The battle for humanity's survival was just beginning. "This is far from over," Clark muttered. "We've only just started to show them what we're made of." And with that, the Vanguard prepared for the next wave of battle. The turning point, the space around the Vanguard, was now a sea of wreckage. Burned-out hulks of enemy ships drifted slowly through the void, their twisted remains silent witnesses to the fury unleashed by the human fleet. The once unified Zreth fleet had fractured, but they weren't retreating. They were regrouping. Captain Clark stood at the command deck, her eyes scanning the debris-filled space. The explosion of the Zreth flagship had caused chaos, but it wasn't enough. The remaining ships had quickly reorganized, and now they were focused on destroying humanity once and for all. Clark's mind raced, trying to come up with the next move. The Vanguard and the remaining human ships were battered and low on resources. There was no time to rest. "Captain, the Zreth are regrouping. They're forming a new line of defense." Commander Lee's voice came through sharply. "They've adapted faster than we thought." Clark clenched her fists, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on her. Despite the victory over the flagship, the battle was far from won. The Zreth had shown their true colors. They weren't just invaders. They were predators, relentless and cunning. And now, they were even angrier. "We can't let them have time to regroup. We need to press the attack now, before they can get back into formation," Clark said, her voice firm, determined. Lieutenant Carson turned to the captain, his face drawn with exhaustion. "But Captain, our energy reserves are almost depleted. We don't have enough firepower to keep pushing forward without recharging." "Then we make do with what we've got," she replied, without hesitation. "Prepare the remaining ships. We're going to hit them hard and fast, and we're not stopping until they're on the run." Clark knew they were in a dangerous position. It wasn't just about the battle now. It was about sending a message. Humanity would not back down. They would not be bullied or destroyed by any alien race, no matter how powerful. The remaining ships in the human fleet, now only a handful, rallied around the Vanguard. Each one, battered and bruised, showed signs of resilience. They had fought together before, but this was different. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was a fight for the future of humanity. And no matter how bleak things looked, they wouldn't give up. "All ships, prepare for a full-throttle charge," Clark commanded. We'll go in fast and hit them where they least expect it." The fleet turned as one, heading toward the Zreth ships. As they moved, the Vanguard released a burst of speed, its engines roaring to life. The remaining ships followed closely behind, ready to give everything they had. The Zreth ships, still regrouping, hadn't expected the human fleet to mount a counterattack so quickly. But the Zreth were not easy prey. As the humans closed in, the remaining Zreth ships began to fire, their weapons lighting up the dark space. The Vanguard dodged and weaved, avoiding the blasts as best it could, but the ship was beginning to show signs of strain. The crew braced themselves for the impact of the incoming shots. The ship shuddered as an energy bolt struck, sending a ripple through the hull. "Shields holding at 30%. Lieutenant Carson called out, his voice laced with urgency. "We're losing power too fast." The human fleet pushed forward despite the odds, knowing they had no other choice. They had to end this now. Clark's eyes remained locked on the Zreth ships, which were now closing in. There was no turning back. She knew this could be the final stand for humanity. And then, in the chaos of battle, something unexpected happened. "Captain, incoming ship, it's human." Commander Lee shouted, his voice filled with disbelief. Clark's eyes widened as she turned toward the readout. A new ship had just emerged from the nearby asteroid belt. It was human, but it wasn't part of the fleet. It wasn't one of the ships that had been fighting alongside them. "What's going on? Where did that ship come from?" Clark demanded. The new ship was a strange sight. It was far more advanced than anything humanity had ever built. Sleek, black, and seemingly made from materials unknown to the human fleet, it was unlike anything the Vanguard had ever encountered. Its hull shimmered with energy, and it moved with unnatural precision. "It's one of ours, but it's not part of our fleet, Captain," Carson replied, his voice tense. "That ship wasn't in our roster." Clark's mind raced. What was happening? Who had sent this ship? And why was it joining the fight now, of all times? "Open a channel," Clark ordered. The ship's mysterious captain responded almost instantly, his voice calm and collected, though there was an undeniable urgency in his tone. "Captain Clark, we've come to help. But this won't be easy. I've got the firepower to take on this Zreth fleet, but I'll need your support. Together, we can win this." Clark's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just a ship. It was a new ally, a new force in the war that humanity had never known about. She didn't know where this ship had come from, but one thing was clear. Humanity wasn't fighting alone anymore. "Get ready, everyone. This is our moment. We're going to end this war." With renewed hope, the human fleet surged forward, now backed by the mysterious new ship. The tide of battle had shifted. But Clark knew one thing for sure. The fight was far from over. And the Zreth had just made their biggest mistake yet. They had underestimated humanity. The unexpected alliance. As the strange new ship aligned with the human fleet, the atmosphere on the Vanguard shifted. The crew, who had been weary and battle-worn, now felt a spark of hope. The Zreth fleet was strong, but the appearance of this new ship, an unknown ally, had changed the balance. Captain Clark stood at the command deck, her hands gripping the controls. She watched the readouts carefully. The mysterious ship moved with precision, its sleek black frame cutting through space like a predator hunting its prey. It wasn't like anything they had seen before, but it had quickly proven itself in the heat of battle. "Captain, incoming message from the new ship." Commander Lee's voice broke through Clark's thoughts. "Open it," Clark ordered, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. The screen flickered, and a man appeared. He was tall, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to hold a deep understanding of the galaxy's dangers. His uniform wasn't anything like the human military standard, yet his demeanor was commanding. He spoke with authority. "Captain Clark," the stranger began, "I am Commander Varys. I've come to assist you in this battle. We've been watching the Zreth for some time, and we know what they are capable of. I assure you, you are not alone in this war." Clark felt a rush of questions flood her mind. Who was this person? Where had he come from? And why had they stayed hidden until now? But she pushed those questions aside for the moment. They had more pressing matters to focus on. Why now? Why not sooner? Clark asked, her voice laced with suspicion. Varys gave a slight nod. We've been observing. Humanity's resilience against the Zreth has been impressive, but until now, it wasn't clear if you had the strength to push back. But now you've proven that you have what it takes. We're ready to help. Clark glanced at her crew. They were tired, but their spirits were lifted. Varys and his mysterious ship were offering them the chance they desperately needed. And in that moment, Clark made a decision. All right, Commander Varys, she said, her voice firm. Let's finish what we started. We'll take them down together. Varys's ship moved closer to the human fleet, and the battle was about to intensify. The Zreth, unaware of the new alliance forming, continued to regroup, their weapons charged and ready. They were confident that victory was still within their grasp. But they hadn't counted on this. Captain, Zreth fleet is beginning their assault again. Lieutenant Carson called out from the tactical console. But they're not expecting this new ship. It's moving in with incredible speed. Perfect. Clark muttered under her breath. Let's hit them hard. The human fleet, now bolstered by Varys's ship, surged forward, weapons charging. The Zreth ships fired first, sending powerful energy blasts toward the human fleet. But Commander Varys's ship wasn't phased. It dodged effortlessly, its shields absorbing the blasts without losing momentum. The black ship then returned fire with shocking force, each shot hitting the Zreth ship with devastating precision. The Zreth were thrown off guard. Their ships tried to retaliate, but the new ship's advanced technology made them nearly impossible to target. It was as if the ship knew their every move before they made it. Their shields are weakening, Commander Lee shouted. If we hit them now, we could cripple them. All ships prepare to fire together. Clark commanded. Let's show them what humanity is capable of. The fleet opened fire as one. The energy blasts from the Vanguard and the other human ships hit their targets with deadly accuracy. But it was Varys's ship that delivered the finishing blow. It fired a concentrated beam of energy, cutting through the Zreth flagship's shields and blasting it into oblivion. For a moment, the battlefield fell silent. The Zreth fleet had lost its command ship. Their morale shattered, and confusion spread throughout their ranks. The once dominant invaders were now reeling, their plans crumbling around them. We've done it, Captain. The Zreth are in retreat. Lieutenant Carson exclaimed, his voice filled with disbelief. But Clark didn't relax. Not yet. She knew the Zreth were dangerous, and this victory didn't mean the war was over. However, the tide had shifted. The Zreth had underestimated humanity, and now they were about to feel the consequences. Keep your guard up. We don't know if they're going to regroup or if reinforcements are on the way, Clark said, her voice calm but firm. This isn't over, but it's a victory we'll remember. She looked over at Varys's ship, still floating in the void. There were many questions left to answer. But for now, one thing was clear. Humanity had a new ally. And together, they had just dealt a devastating blow to the Zreth. The galaxy would soon learn that humanity was not just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to protect their future. The secrets unveiled. The quiet hum of the ship's engines was all that could be heard as Captain Clark walked down the long, narrow corridor. Her mind was swirling with a mixture of questions and emotions. The sudden appearance of Varys and his advanced ship had turned the tide of the battle. The Zreth were now retreating, but Clark couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. She stopped outside the observation deck, looking out at the endless expanse of space. The stars twinkled in the distance, but her thoughts were far away, focused on the mysterious Commander Varys and his cryptic words. Humanity had been thrown into a war, and just when it seemed like all hope was lost, an unexpected ally had appeared. Captain, a voice called from behind her. Clark turned to see Commander Lee, his face serious as usual. "We've received a secure transmission from Varys. He wants to speak with you." Clark nodded and followed him to the communications room. The walls of the room were lined with holographic screens, each showing data or tactical information from the ongoing conflict. But now, the screens flickered and switched to show Varys' familiar face. "Captain Clark, I trust the battle was a success," Varys said, his deep voice calm but carrying an edge of authority. "We couldn't have done it without you, Commander." Clark's words were sincere, but her curiosity pushed her to ask, "But why now? Why didn't you step in sooner?" Varys was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke again, but this time his tone was more solemn. "There are things you need to understand, Captain. Things that go beyond this war." Clark frowned. "What do you mean?" "The Zreth aren't just another alien race. They've been hunting your species for a reason. Your kind, humanity, has something they've been searching for." Clark's heart skipped a beat. What could humanity possibly have that would interest them? Varys paused, clearly weighing his next words. "I cannot explain it all in one transmission, but the Zreth have known about humanity for longer than you realize. They've been observing you, watching you grow. And now, they're determined to control you. But there's something different about your species, something they never anticipated." Clark leaned forward, her mind racing. "What's that? What do they see in us?" "Humanity's potential." Varys' voice softened, almost with reverence. "You are more resilient, more capable of adaptation than any species I've ever encountered. And that's what terrifies the Zreth. They feared that if humanity reached its full potential, you would become more powerful than any other species in the galaxy." Clark stood in stunned silence. The weight of his words was enough to make her question everything she knew. Humanity had been fighting to survive, to protect its future. But now, she realized there was something more at stake. The Zreth weren't just invaders. They were trying to prevent something they feared more than anything. "But why did you wait until now?" Clark asked again, unable to shake her suspicion. "Why not intervene earlier when we were struggling to survive?" Varys' eyes darkened. "Because the Zreth weren't the only ones watching." Clark's heart pounded in her chest. "What do you mean?" Varys didn't immediately respond, but the pause felt heavy, like the silence before a storm. Finally, he continued, his voice low. "There are other forces at work in this galaxy, forces that have been keeping an eye on humanity for millennia. They'd been waiting to see how you would react to the Zreth, to see if you would rise to the challenge. And you have. You've proven that humanity has the strength to protect itself, to fight for what's right. That's why I'm here, Captain. I was sent to help you, but there are others who will come when the time is right." Clark's mind was reeling. This war had already taken a toll on her, but now she realized that there was a much larger game being played. The Zreth were just one piece of the puzzle. Humanity's role in this galaxy was far more complicated than she could have ever imagined. "So, what happens now?" Clark asked, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts racing through her mind. "Now, Captain, the real battle begins. You've made an enemy of the Zreth, but you've also made allies you don't fully understand yet. Your fight is far from over. But I believe humanity is ready. I believe you are ready." Clark took a deep breath, looking at the images of the Zreth ships retreating in the distance. She had no idea what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for their place in the galaxy. "Understood, Commander. We'll be ready." The transmission ended, and Clark stood in the silence of the room, her thoughts swirling. The Zreth were only the beginning. A much larger conflict was unfolding, one that would test humanity in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But whatever lay ahead, she was ready. The galaxy would soon know what humanity was capable of. And it was going to be a force they would never forget. A new ally emerges. Captain Clark stared at the empty space where the transmission from Varys had just ended. The reality of his words weighed heavily on her shoulders. She had thought that the Zreth were the only threat. But now, there were hints of something much larger. Forces watching humanity, waiting for its response. A test, as Varys had said. "Captain, we've got a situation." Commander Lee's voice echoed through the communication channel, snapping Clark out of her thoughts. She turned and made her way to the command deck. "What's going on?" Lee met her halfway, his expression grim. "We've detected another fleet. Not Zreth. They're different. They're not attacking, but they're not exactly friendly either." Clark's mind immediately raced. She had no time to rest after the Zreth's retreat. The war was far from over, and now this new threat loomed on the horizon. "Can we identify them?" she asked, her voice calm despite the tension building in her chest. Lee shook his head. "No. Their ships are like nothing we've seen before. They're scanning us, but we can't make out their intentions. It's almost like they're observing us." Clark paused. A cold shiver ran down her spine. This felt like another test. But who were they? And why had they chosen this moment to reveal themselves? "Any word from Varys?" she asked, her voice laced with urgency. "Not yet, Captain. I sent a request for communication, but nothing back so far." Clark nodded. "Keep trying. Meanwhile, I want all weapons ready. We don't know if these new ships are friendly or hostile, but I'm not going to wait and find out." The crew moved quickly to prepare for whatever might come next. The unknown was terrifying, and yet there was a strange feeling of anticipation. Humanity had already faced the Zreth and emerged stronger. Perhaps this new challenge was another opportunity to prove their worth. Hours passed in tense silence. The fleet hovered at the edge of their territory, and the crew worked tirelessly to monitor any changes in the behavior of the unknown ships. Clark couldn't shake the feeling that they were being observed, watched from the shadows. Finally, a signal pinged on the screen in front of her. A transmission was incoming. She rushed to the console, her heart pounding in her chest. "Captain, we've got a response," Lee said, his voice calm but with a hint of excitement. "It's from Varys." Clark quickly activated the communication. The face of Commander Varys appeared on the screen, his expression grave, but not without a hint of hope. "Captain Clark." Varys greeted her, his voice deep and steady. "I know you've encountered the unknown fleet. They are not your enemies, but they are not yet your allies either. They are observers, much like my people were in the past." Clark frowned. "Observers? What do they want?" "They are part of a much larger coalition of species, Captain. They'd been monitoring humanity for centuries. They were watching your response to the Zreth. And now, they are watching how you react to them." Clark's mind raced. This was the moment Varys had been talking about. Humanity was being tested once again. But for what purpose? "And what happens now?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts inside her. Varys's eyes narrowed slightly, as if considering how much to reveal. "What happens now depends on you, Captain. Your species has shown that it has the potential to become something greater. But the decision to join the Galactic Coalition is yours to make. You have the strength to stand on your own. But if you choose to ally with them, the future could be very different." Clark took a deep breath, staring at the screen. The galaxy was opening up in front of her, but it was a vast and dangerous place. The Zreth were only the beginning. She could feel the weight of the decision on her shoulders. "We'll need time to think about it, Commander," Clark said, her voice firm. "We can't make a decision on something this big without understanding what it means for humanity. But thank you for the warning." Varys nodded. "I understand, Captain. But remember, time is a luxury you don't have. The Zreth won't be the last to come for you. And the decision you make now could change the fate of your species." The transmission ended, leaving Clark with more questions than answers. She turned to Lee, who had been quietly observing the exchange. "What do you think?" Clark asked. Lee was silent for a moment before answering. "I think we don't have much time. The Zreth were bad, but what Varys is describing sounds like something much bigger. If we don't act fast, we could be facing enemies from every direction. Clark nodded. We'll need to prepare for everything. Get the fleet ready, Commander. I don't know what's coming next, but humanity needs to be ready to face it, no matter what. As the crew worked in silence, Clark couldn't help but wonder what kind of galaxy humanity had just entered. The unknown fleet was still out there, watching, waiting, and the Zreth were not gone for good. They would return, just as Varys had predicted. The real test was just beginning, and this time, humanity's survival might depend on whether they could unite with allies who had once been enemies, or if they would face a galaxy that would never let them forget who they were. The choice that will define humanity's future. Captain Clark stood in the command center, staring at the fleet of unknown ships that lingered at the edge of their system. The tension in the room was palpable. The crew was working quietly, keeping their eyes on their monitors, waiting for any sign of what the next move might be. There was no telling whether the ships were allies, enemies, or something else entirely. But one thing was certain. Their presence was a clear sign that humanity had entered a new chapter in its existence, a chapter that would be written by the decisions made in the coming hours. A soft ping echoed through the room, and Clark turned sharply to face the communication console. The transmission had been received. This was it. The decision that Varys had warned her about, the decision that would determine whether humanity would take its first steps into the larger galactic community or stand alone. She swallowed hard, her mind racing. She had never imagined she would be put in a position like this, but here she was. "Captain," Lee said, his voice carrying the hint of uncertainty. "The fleet's communication system is now open. We're ready to send a response." Clark nodded but didn't immediately speak. She had thought long and hard about this moment. The stakes were higher than anything they had faced before. Humanity had been tested by the Zreth, and now the true test had arrived. The unknown fleet, whatever their intentions, could mean the difference between life and extinction. Could they trust these new beings? Would they be their allies or their conquerors? With a steadying breath, Clark finally spoke. "Send a message, a simple one for now. We are ready to talk." Lee hesitated only for a moment before complying. The message was brief and clear. Humanity is ready for an alliance. The words echoed in Clark's mind. An alliance. Was it truly the right path, or had they just set themselves on a dangerous road they could never turn back from? The minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Clark's fingers drummed lightly against the edge of the command console. She couldn't help but think of everything that had brought her to this point. The battles, the Zreth, the unexpected ally in Varys, and all the countless lives that had been sacrificed. The galaxy was a brutal, unforgiving place, and she had seen firsthand how quickly things could change. Suddenly, the screen flickered to life, and a new face appeared. This time, one that wasn't Varys. The alien before her was tall, with dark, violet skin and intricate markings that ran across its face like glowing veins. It was unlike any species she had seen before, and its expression was unreadable. "Humanity," the alien said, its voice resonating with a strange echoing quality, as if many voices spoke in unison. "We have received your message. You stand at a crossroads. You have faced your enemies, and now you face us. We are the Council of the Allied Species. Our purpose is not to conquer, but to test. Your actions in the coming days will determine if you are ready for the galaxy, or if you will be left behind." Clark stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. The weight of their words was immense, and the implications even more so. "What does that mean?" she finally managed to ask. "It means," the alien replied, "that you have passed the first test. You have fought for your survival. But survival alone is not enough. The second test is trust. You will need to decide who you will trust, and whether you can work together with others. The choice is yours, Captain. Humanity's future depends on it ***. The transmission ended, leaving Clark staring at the blank screen. Her mind was spinning. What kind of test was this? Trust. How could they trust anyone after everything that had happened? Humanity had fought hard to survive, but now they were being asked to work with beings that had once been their enemies. It was a paradox, and the decision felt impossibly heavy. Captain. Lee's voice interrupted her thoughts. Do you think they're telling the truth? Can we really trust them? Clark turned toward him. She saw the same uncertainty in his eyes that she felt in her own heart. But she also saw something else, something she had seen in the eyes of every member of her crew. Hope. The hope that humanity could be part of something greater, something beyond the struggles they had known. They had always fought for survival, but perhaps now they had the chance to fight for a future. She took a deep breath and met Lee's gaze. We have to trust them. Her voice was steady, though she knew the road ahead would be fraught with danger. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about what kind of species we want to become. Lee nodded. You're right, Captain. Let's do this. Clark turned back to the communication console. She looked out at the fleet of unknown ships, waiting for her response. Humanity's future had just been set in motion, and the path was uncertain. But one thing was clear. This was their moment to define who they were in the vastness of the universe. She hit the button to send a message, the words appearing on the screen in bold text. Humanity is ready to join the galaxy. And as the message was transmitted into the cold void of space, Clark couldn't help but wonder what challenges awaited them next. The galaxy had its eyes on humanity, and the story of their survival had only just begun.